I'm going to begin by explaining to you the bow, as if you didn't know. But one of the marks of teaching, I think, is just reminding you what you already know. So you might learn something in that. I know I will. The bow can be seen as a number of different activities, disciplines, practices. I find myself doing it often around the house, different areas of the house, for different reasons, different entities, often to my sleeping children. And since I've started being a parent, I've spent a lot of time in the kitchen and have installed a kitchen shrine, and find that the shrine offers me an opportunity to practice while I'm in a high level of activity. And by practice, I mean stop and watch my mind and observe the moment, which can get lost, again, in all that activity. So one of the functions of the bow is to leave the activity and the busyness and the speed of the world momentarily, leave it behind, and transition into a different space. And so we do this bow at the beginning of our meetings at Windhorse Boulder as a way to transition. It's also a practice of generosity and acknowledgement of the wisdom that one is about to receive from one's colleagues and friends and teachers. And so it's an opening up to the wisdom that's about to be shared. And simultaneously, it's an appreciation for what's about to take place. It's an opportunity to pause, slow down, be present, and to be grateful. So let's bow together with a real presence of what it actually means to us. It can be seen as a very sectarian activity, but in fact, it's a very human thing to do. When Mingyur came out of retreat, one of his instructions around the bow was to raise one's gaze into the horizon at the end, kind of an gesture of expansion and dissolving. I might have said that before we actually did it, but if you can remember, next time you bow, try that out. Thank you, Polly. Let's sit for 2 to 3 minutes.
Welcome to this final working session of the conference. So we're at the certain kind of completion place. I'd like to introduce you to the legacy group, what we call ourselves. We call ourselves the Windhorse Legacy Group. My name's Jeff Fortuna. This is Matt Allen, Polly Banerjee Gallagher, and Blake Bailey. I'm just going to say a little bit about the legacy group, and we can go from there. When I returned to Boulder from Northampton in 2002, I quickly became involved with what was then called the Windhorse Guild, still called the Windhorse Guild. It's a nonprofit here. It's a sister organization to Windhorse Community Services, and a small group. And Ed Podville arrived from retreat shortly after Molly and I moved back to Boulder. And so we had a year together with Ed here in Boulder, and it was a poignant time. He was already quite ill and died about a year after arriving. And I inherited his intellectual property, which was extensive, and felt like a huge responsibility in a way. And I decided to create a project within the Guild called the Archive Project, for lack of a better term. And we were going to try to preserve what at the time was Ed's intellectual property and other people that had contributed to the Windhorse Project up to that point. A preservation and a sharing of that property. Teachings about Windhorse. So, that went on for, I don't know, 12 years maybe. And I had learned the art of fundraising in Northampton because I was asked to do that, and as the director there. And so I felt some confidence about continuing that. So I basically became a fundraiser for the Archive Project. And that's, to this day, mostly how we fund our activity, is through fundraising. 7 years ago, I was talking to one of my teachers, and he said, I was telling him the story of my relationship with Ed and with Windhorse, and he himself is a spiritual teacher. And he told me, though, it's a genuine healing lineage. You need to make sure that that is taken care of and preserved and passed on. And so he introduced me to his family foundation, and I met with the foundation people, and they agreed, and they said, well, this is a problem throughout the Western world, which is the continuity of lineages altogether. Few of them are able to be carried forward for all kinds of reasons. And they challenged me to come up with a plan. And last thing I thought of doing, and they challenged me and they said, we'll help you, we'll fund that. So I thought about this, and I decided what would be the most meaningful to me and supportive to me and most interesting would be to have a small group work on this. And so I invited my 3 colleagues to join me. And they accepted. They said, okay. already seasoned Windhorse people. And so we were going to, essentially our task at the beginning was to study and create living environments of transition and transmission of that legacy, and we were going to study it and do it at the same time. And we were going to, so we became right away a research group and a learning group, and we were going to actually do it. So we set about that, and we've been working now together for 7 years, and our group has gone through many stages. We quickly created something of a perimeter around our group, and so in some ways we've been in retreat for about 7 years. And this is the first time that we have ever sat with a group of people and tried to describe and present what we're doing and some of the questions we're facing, which I think are also questions we're all facing. So we've decided to come out of retreat. It was my idea. I got to take the blame for that. Our group seems to function on the basis of being asked, which is something we've begun to learn about teacher development in Windhorse, and maybe in any kind of healing endeavor, is that people are asked to do things. People respond to requests. So I asked the group to engage in this conference and to engage with the topic of how teachers are developed in Windhorse, what are the role of teachers, what's the future of teachers, because it's not something that people talk about very much. So I said, can we do this? And this was several months ago. So that set our group into motion. So we did what we always do, which is that together we looked into for ourselves in a spirit of inquiry and exploration and discovery. And that is the living spirit of our group. So we launched into this exploration of this topic, the development of Windhorse teachers. So there was a quote from Recovering Sanity, Ed Podwell's book, that I've been living with him for 30 years. So I was there with him. I was a kind of author attendant, helping him write that book. And you might have this idea that people sometimes say, "Well, Jeff, you're so you're just everything's all about Ed." Well, that may seem like that on the surface, but in the early days of Windhorse, we were generating ideas, methods, approaches, attitudes from the matrix of the group. Ed wrote a book about that. In that sense, it looks like he's the author of those ideas. He's the author of the record. But these ideas, and this quote I'm about to read, it's not Jeff endlessly quoting Ed. This is also this is an idea and an approach that we were all involved with. And concerned about. So I'm just going to read this, just a few lines, which became the working thesis of our inquiry and the basis for our what we'd also like to talk about today. So Ed is writing in chapter 7 about therapeutic community. I don't remember hearing that phrase this morning in the panel group discussion on community. Maybe I missed it. Windhorse is an intentional community, a therapeutic community, right? That's what we do. So he's writing about therapeutic community, and he's writing about binding factors. You might remember that section. He's also writing about the heritage Maxwell Jones bequeathed to Windhorse. This is another one of our sources. source teachers. So Ed writes, historically, therapeutic community was meant to be an ideal democratic process. It left little room for the final binding factor, natural hierarchy. No community can survive without the presence of teachers and elders who can transmit the wisdom of the community and train others to become teachers. In this way, the practices of the community can stay alive and have a continuity beyond the teachers. So this is directly addressing this question of how can the Windhorse Project survive and thrive past us. So maybe I now could ask my colleagues to share their, in some ways, their essential reflections on this topic.
Sure. I think I'm going to start, and then Polly, and then Blake, and then back around to you, Jeff. So I've got three kind of things to say today. The first one I would classify as light. The second one maybe goes a little bit into the dark. And the third one comes back out into the light. For some reason, it feels very important to me to try to talk about not just what has been kind of a buoyant ride as being a part of this group, but also some of the challenges that we have faced as a group as well. So starting with the light, this has to do with being a teacher. I'm only a teacher in one role currently at Windhorse, at least formally, which is doing supervision for the Track 1 BAs, and we meet twice a month. Tim Onspach is the other person in that position as well. And the reason why I'm bringing in that group is because I think I've had some kind of a radical learning experience in that group around how legacy and how teachers and how one energizes oneself to continually learn, even as teaching. I shared this a little bit earlier with Rachel because she is one of the members of that group, and I think you're the only one here right now from that group, that in that room we have created somehow a confidence and relationship between the facilitators and the members to be able to speak really openly about how we are feeling. And in many ways, that has provided for me as much learning, or maybe a little bit more than what I have learned, or maybe let's just say that it's equal, from the many people at Windhorse who have been my more formal teachers, including Jeff and Anne-Marie and Chuck and Jamie and other folks in the community. And I want to just make this point because it's something that doesn't strike me as implicit. Maybe it is. Maybe others are equally aware of this. But somehow it seems to strike me as this, it really wakes me up. And it gives me more energy, really, in being a teacher in that role. The idea that, yes, we learn from our elders, but we also learn from those who are just stepping into a role, or those who have only been in it for a short period of time. They ask questions, they push buttons, they, particularly in this group, and particularly Rachel, there's no fear around really pushing up against what has been kind of taken as doctrine. Maybe that's a strong word, or taken at least as sort of how we do things around here. And it can be easy for me to forget that just because I've been around for a while, that I know what I'm talking about. So that's the first part, just to share that I've been really appreciative. And it hasn't happened in every group where I've been a supervisor. Somehow there's a synchronicity there and an openness on both sides to be real. And that has been very important for me. So I want to seed this experience into we're going to have a conversation afterwards, the four of us, and then open it up. And what I'm sharing here is meant to be a potential seed for that. The second, as I said, is a little bit more into the dark, and it has to do with when the Legacy group came together, there were a lot of hard feelings, and I think hurt feelings in our Windhorse community. Partially because, in a way, we were operating without making it public for a while, and then it would come out in different ways. And I had personal conversations with a number of people in my cohort and across the organization where it just felt yucky. I guess that's the best word to use. It seems like 7 years later that a lot of that is not as strong, and I have strong relationships with all of those folks. And I just wanted to mention it, that it was a challenging step in some ways for me as a participant to be able to recognize that we were being asked into something, but then also how to hold that and how to share that and how not to be embarrassed of that or how not to be afraid of that, etc. And I think it was the other folks in the cohort. We have found our way, like I said, but I didn't want to miss that piece. And then finally, and again, that's a seed for potential conversation here. And then finally, I have a lot of interest and curiosity and questions about what happens in the other Windhorse centers when it comes to teachers and teaching, and how does it work there? And I don't mean just the process, but also what are the politics of that? How is there a curriculum? I know that Jeff and others are part of a worldwide discussion, and that there's a lot of teaching also between Jeff and others with other places, and Anne Marie has traveled to other places and done teachings, but just some sense of how does it happen elsewhere as well in terms of, and what are other centers doing? So that may be something that folks can share when we get to the more open discussion. And that's me.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So, well, as Jeff said, my name is Polly Banerjee Gallagher, and I was born in Myanmar, which is also known as Burma to some people. I have lived in the United States for, I don't know, many, many years. And I became a United States citizen when I was 18. And my first language is actually Burmese. English is my third language. So why am I sharing all of this? Well, it's because I learned this yesterday in the inclusivity panel when there was an introduction and people spoke more from their experience of location. I immediately felt this sense of connection. Instead of like talking about our roles or how long we've been in Windhorse, Jeff and I talked about this, where it can feel like it's just so in a box being defined. So for me, I think that I am pointing to more being a student, somebody who is open, and that just even in this conference, I've learned so much. But I get to take in and own some of these new things that I'm learning, which is why I was thinking, well, instead of introducing ourselves with roles and how long we've been in something, how about we share a little bit more about ourselves? It was really effective for me to hear it. So one of the things that came up in my mind when we were contemplating this question is just that notion of when we hear something, when we are open and curious, then how do we make it ours? How does it integrate with who we are, what our experiences have been, and then how does that come back out in ways that is not always quantifiable as teachers? How do you embody it? So that's been a contemplation of mine when it comes to having been in Windhorse for most of my professional life and what keeps me here? What is it that continues to feel like there's more to learn, but at the same time, there's more to share as well. So that was one of the things that I was really thinking about, and all the different panels that I had the privilege of going to, really noticing that we have a shared language together. And I mentioned mutual recovery on the first night, and heard it a few times, and we know what that means to some degree. I think we have some, at least some basis for understanding that. That's because we've shared it with one another. So how do we continue to do that? It's like a process of growing and sharing. The other thing that came up in my mind is what you were saying, Jeff, about recovering sanity. How much work and effort and intention and mostly everything that Ed put into it. And so much of it has become a part of us. We don't always say, well, as Ed Podville said, I think you have the capacity to pull out some extra quotes that other people don't, but at the same time, it's like we're free to use it. And one of the encouragements you gave us when we were writing, that stuck with me, is don't be afraid to own something. You don't have to be so worried that you're duplicating, replicating. If it becomes yours, it's your language, your experience. And that helped free my mind in some way. And I think as teachers, there's that openness that can come to be able to share based on our own experience and what's important to us. And I think for me, one of the aspirations is we have this book, Recovering Sanity, and it's been really relevant, it's really served, and there's also room for us to be creative. Maybe there's another book, and this time, instead of a parable with a white man, it could be a woman who was born in Myanmar. Who knows? We can be open and creative and let in more of who we are as we're evolving. And I think the panel yesterday really, the inclusivity panel also really touched my heart that way. It's like how much I have still to learn about what people are going through in terms of gender identity, and just listening to what I call the younger people on the panel. It felt really special, and I felt like I was just learning and growing in that, and then I started to think about what can I take from that, and then it becomes mine, and then maybe there's something that we say here that others resonate with and can make it yours. So that's one of the main things that came up for me as we were contemplating. And also, Matt, you've said this, where there's like a line that gets blurred when you're really allowing it. It's not always you're learning from your elders. If you're paying attention, there's so much that you can just fluidly share and learn and grow from. So my hope is that we can continue to do that and continue to share. And it's amazing that, just so much care that came into developing all of these, the different Windhorse centers in all these different countries. So it also translates that way. So how do we continue to do that? Because I don't know who was saying this, but somebody was saying that this should be the way that people are treated, from a Windhorse perspective of treating everybody as human beings, as ways that we would want to be treated. I mean, it's easy to talk about, but it's harder to manifest that. And I think what we've been doing and what we've been practicing together comes the closest. Blake?
Thank you, Polly. Thanks, Matt. Well, gosh. This is impossible to really talk about, mostly because I don't really know what to say. I think that became clear to me once the topic was posed, about the development and possibly evolution of teaching in Windhorse, and my page was blank for a long, long time, and I never really submitted anything except for maybe the day before. But I think I brought the blank part up to Kathy Emery, and she said, "That's it. It's about that. That's the thing." Blank, the space, the gap that we talk about in our practice, and I've definitely experienced that in teaching situations and other situations that have involved standing in front of groups and being expected to say this or say that, and it's a horrible thing when you can't find your voice, and you've lost your orientation, your sense of direction, and so from the ordinary and the observable point of view, it's pretty bad, because you are expected to pass on some information. I mean, that's why you're there as a teacher. But I've found that especially at Naropa and Windhorse, that those moments are really valuable. There's just a lot of data, it's a lot of evidence right there in that moment, because it's an opportunity. If your students are good students, and that's another part of teaching, is being a good student. And I've tried to do that. I'm not the best student academically, but I have been a good student just in terms of when I've been interested in the material, I have engaged the material. And I've also given my teachers a lot of latitude to be whoever the hell they want to be, or how they want to be, and how they need to manifest so that they can get the juice to me. And so I've found that I haven't had 100% successful situations with that gap. With Anne Marie, she and I taught the psychosis class at Naropa for a number of years, and it was really great. But we did have periods where we had difficulties with there were blockages going on between us and the students. And when that happens, it's so noticeable, and you never really forget it, and I never will. It was very painful, because I'm sure that it was just some sort of mutual, instead of mutual recovery, it was like a mutual fucking, it was like a, one of those things. You're just going out behind town and digging shallow graves. But usually I've found that in these gaps, especially at Windhorse, because I gap out all the time in these meetings, and I'll just sit there, but then everyone is generally, there's just kind of, there's space, and there's opportunity, and there's openness. And what's happening there is it opens up opportunities for exchange. And exchange, I've found, aside from the content of whatever is being taught, there's a lot of learning going on underneath that content. And so that's another area that I'd love to hear from all of you about, is there's the manifest teaching material, and then there's the underneath, the latent, or the exchange level of learning that takes place. Yeah, a lot of appreciation for that, because there aren't a lot of working and teaching environments where I've found that takes place. I taught for 3 years in Korea. I taught English as a second language, and I've taught in other types of environments and done a lot of trainings and things like that. And this is a very unique kind of situation that we have going here. So this is something that we ought to examine further. And I want to put a plug in for study, and not just psychology. I think people should read poems, and I like television a great deal, and there's a lot of really good TV out there. So I think that we should watch more television. Jeff.
Depends on what you watch.
Anything will do. The medium is the message.
So Blake mentioned that he was submitting, or we were starting with a blank page. So we are working on a paper. This is one thing we do. We're working on a paper to explore the topic of how teachers already exist in the Windhorse work in the different centers, how they emerge, what's the path of a teacher development, and so and all the areas that are being taught. So we're working on a kind of paper which we hope to share with all of you if you're interested. So that's kind of how we conduct our research. We have a kind of look into the topic deeply, we talk among ourselves, we read things, we study things together, and then we write. And writing has become one of our disciplines, and it's a way we push ourselves to further clarity. And as Polly was suggesting, well, she wasn't really suggesting, she was saying that we commit to what we know about something, and we know the edge of where we don't know. So we're working on a paper that's, and it's been part of our research is witnessing basically all of the teachers of Windhorse are present here. And so this has been a very interesting experience to watch all the different teachers in action. And we knew that coming in, that this was going to be something we were going to be paying attention to. It's, I just want to say a couple of things. I don't want to, we've had such a rich diet of words and ideas. I mean, I can't imagine your tolerance for this kind of thing. Really, I don't know how you do this, but good for you that we can. I don't know how that happens. So we're going to try to take it easy on ourselves and on you today. We're not going to just pile on more rich food. So it seems like a lot of the teaching that's already going on is a couple of different ways. One is in supervision, wherever that happens. On a clinical team, in a more formal group. Supervision is a training, teaching kind of activity that just goes across almost all Windhorse activity. The other is that it's kind of maybe unique to Windhorse is that people stay for a long time and commit themselves to the work. So then you have an intergenerational kind of community going on. Somewhere I might have mentioned this before. So the elders are people like myself, for example. So I've just turned 70. The elders become teachers just as a stage of life, of giving back, of sharing hard-won experience, of distilling maybe what's most important to one, helping the younger people understand what's most important to them, help them find that, help them even think about that. So there's a kind of intergenerational process that's already going on. So we model, a lot of it is modeled, and the younger people kind of pick up because they're working alongside of each other. It's all great. It's already happening. And so in that sense, you rarely hear somebody in a Windhorse center being designated as a teacher. You hear a lot of formal role titles of psychotherapists, and we've been hearing this forever, right? Especially since we've been here. Housemates and all the rest of it, psychiatrists do psychiatry. And so there's all these roles, right? But for whatever reasons, we haven't really emphasized designated people as teachers. You don't really hear that. And as I thought about this, I thought, well, that's terrific, because it somehow leaves the realm of teaching out of the realm of politics and territory and pride. So I thought that's kind of interesting. And so when we were working with our group, our legacy group, and our group was developing, and we had the opportunity to teach the psychotherapy seminar to the Portland group, which we did all of last year. We're still doing it. I realized it was an opportunity for my three partners to learn how to be teachers. It was purely an organic, natural phase of our development as a group and their development as people in Windhorse, committed students of Windhorse. That I thought was tricky, as if they might earn a certificate in being a teacher, and what goes with that is a credential, credentialing pride, being projected upon. That's all the politics of all that. I thought, well, but on the other hand, I think our times require bold measures. So I think it's okay for us to take the risk of talking about teachers of Windhorse, in Windhorse, because we're faced with the continuity and the longevity, or lack of, this project. And since this quote of Ed's, he's saying, well, it's the teachers that teach the practices and keep this going. Well, maybe we should just fess up and approach that directly, knowing we'll deal with the issues of pride and politic along the way. We just will. So we've got two built-in safeguards. Protections. One is what Blake was referring to, which is that the best teachers are the best students. So we're always emphasizing our own learning, helping others to learn, the process of learning, rather than saying something like, I am a teacher. But we take some pride in being able to say, I am a student. That in itself is a safeguard on so many levels. It's an energy generative statement. So, yes, I am a student. I am following the path of being a student. The second safeguard is something that I learned from Ed, which he was not quite sure where he learned this. He learned this through his own development as a teacher, which is the idea of a teacher creating the conditions for other people to come to their own conclusions. So I used this term early on. I was talking about something like an environment of transmission, right? That's a different way of talking about something like transmission or discovery or continuity of a body of teaching, rather than saying, well, there's a transmitter and a transmittee, but creating an environment in which people can learn together and come to their own conclusions. I mean, that is probably, that idea is not only a protection against pride and politic, but it's also creating what I feel is actually happening, at least in Boulder, and I see it happening in the other centers, is a kind of innovative freedom in the work. Like if you talk to any of the psychotherapists in Boulder, all of whom have gone through our training, right? They are so unique and they're so brave in their pursuit of their own learning and their own style. So in that sense, they're free. So teaching a person that doesn't sound quite right. Creating the conditions in which those people can fully manifest the best of themselves. And so I've wondered how this principle of creating environments for people to come to their own conclusions. Actually, I want to ask you and you. So we've had this conference, right? Do Do you feel this conference has created the conditions for people to come to their own conclusions, or some other environment?
You're asking me?
Maybe I'm looking at you, Matt.
Sure.
Just to respond to that question. It's a question, really.
Yes, I think that there have been moments in this conference where I felt that way. I think that it's hard to maintain that field for a long period of time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of like you step into it and you notice it and you feel it, and then maybe it slips away and you step in again. So yes, in the different seminars, talks, discussions, I feel it come and go. So yeah.
Do you want to propose a question like that to one of your partners? Or maybe that same question?
You mean ask Polly what you just asked me?
Or Blake, you can ask it. You can ask. No, it's not what I mean.
Like a question.
You just said something. I asked you a question. You just said something. So now your state of mind has actually shifted, right? Because you just hey, wait a minute. So now I'm wondering if there's a question
that comes from that.
Yes,
I see. Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm pulling it out right now. I think I want to ask Blake a question, which would be something to do with what you were talking about, Blake, is that when you're stuck in that silence where you're not quite sure what to say and you're not quite sure what to do, and it's kind of an awakening moment. Have you experienced that here, in this environment, in this, where we are now? Are you experiencing that right now?
No, I'm not. I think that I've not experienced it here because I haven't really been presenting, and I haven't been in that role, and I think a lot of it is dependent on the role. And now I am. but I really do feel, I think part of what's happening and has happened, and it's actually developed for me over since Thursday night, is some sense of connection and community has started to kind of knit itself together. And honestly, it was a slow start for me. I was having a lot of difficulty staying in the rooms and paying attention and feeling engaged. And I have to, that could be the conference. I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, well, it's because of the conference, but it's so where I was in my own state of mind too. I mean, it was absolutely based on, it was the end of a week. I was pretty wiped out, having a lot of trouble just with different things that were going on in my life. And I was fairly shut down. And so, Matt, I mean, a lot of my experience is based on emotional states and the lens of perception that those states tend to put up.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Got it.
But it's not the conference. But I love what's happened at this conference for me. I don't know what's gone on for all you folks, but I have had a real kind of opening happen, and so that's going to have an impact on what I look like to you guys. I think to you, to Polly. So, Polly, could you tell me what you think about me? Please, just kidding.
That's a good one. You're good.
You're welcome. But Polly, no, I love that you began with your location. And I wonder if you could just carry on a little bit further with that, and then how that's informed your experience of what's happened up here.
With the panel here?
Yeah, yeah. And teaching, being a teacher. Where does that come into your location?
Well, I use location as an entry point to sometimes panels or speaking in front of a large group. There's some pressure to say something profound or interesting. So I wanted to find an entry point that was more true to me, and again I think it's based on what I learned yesterday. That was such a beautiful way that panel, I thought, handled that. So I took that as a way to try to bring out some of the points. And I think just within the context of this conference, it's felt a little dreamlike, really kind of long days that, we started on Thursday, but it feels like we started a week ago, just rich amount of information. And what do we do with all of that? How do we digest it? So that's been coming up. So one way that I relate with that is by, again, being able to take it in and apply it for myself. And then I think the conversations that I've had with other people really had more to do with that, of what's coming up for them, what's relevant, so that, again, I think there's a quality of we are in this like learning and teaching role, whether we're identifying it in that way or not. Is that something? So yeah, in that way, it feels really great for the four of us to be up here, because we've had a lot of experience dialoguing together and being together, so that something maybe processed or embodied could come out like that. That's a way of presenting. We talked about that, of like, do we always have to like say what it is that we're doing, or is there something that we can manifest in some way? What do you think about that, Jeff?
Yeah. I have the sense we should include.
Open it up.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and what I want to do, I'd like to do, is, where's Jack? Well, sir, I wanted to ask Jack, say, and I did give you forewarning, I think. Fair enough. I'm trying to work on that, by the way, calling out people. I'm trying to work on that. So this past year, or previous year, Jack stepped up to lead teach the intensive psychotherapy seminar. No small thing. So Jack, I just wanted to, so brief, brief, yes. It's connected with one of our basic questions, which is the path of the development of a teacher. So I wanted to, if you could just comment on yours. Your path, that way.
I'm not sure where to go with this, but I'll just start talking.
Sure.
So my roles at Windhorse have primarily, in recent years, been psychotherapist and team supervisor, and I've, went through a cycle of teaching the team supervisor as an assistant with Gabriella, and I were assistants to Chuck in the training of team supervisors. And I guess, in teams, there's always, like you said, supervision is a teaching place. So in teams, and I'm sorry, people who are on my teams, I tend to repeat stuff over and over, and I'm kind of refining what I'm thinking. And, I repeat what I say, and I come up with new ideas and insights, and I'm always interested in that. So I feel like over the years, really, there's that kind of accumulated, and it's also, I would say, especially in recent years, at some point Chuck told me, "So Jack, be careful what you say because people are listening." You can't just be the glib, person in the back row. Which I heard you at one point, Jeff, said that you were the obnoxious person in the back row, which I love to think of you as that. The kind of
I was.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So, but I guess there's a path of coming out of the back row and sitting up in the front, and as you do that, you have to be more and more careful about what you say, and you have to think about it, and you have to form it. And then I think also more and more I try to practice not speaking unless, of course, sometimes you're called upon, but I try to not speak unless it kind of rises up inside of me and it becomes inevitable. I have to say something.
Yeah.
I've really watched that a lot. It's like waiting for that urge that I can't deny. It kind of rises up out of my body, I would say. And then, to just jump to the role of being, I felt that interest and urge, and so I, when this next training came forward, I guess for the IPs, there was quite a back process and story that's beyond this moment, I would say. But I felt that urge to, I had things to say too, as well as all of you guys, the senior voices. I felt like I had things to say too, and I agree with what you were also talking about it's important the conditions of that a teacher, it's not a transmission of knowledge. I've been several times saying to our IP trainee group, and I'm co-teaching this with after I was made the lead teacher, then I asked Gretchen and Marta to co-teach it with me, and so the three of us have been holding this together, and together we have like complementary but very different styles and information, and it's been to create the conditions where people could learn. There are no, I'm digressing here, but as I said, there are, I don't think there are like the Windhorse way. That gets the hairs go up on the back of my neck when I hear that. And I've been saying to the people that are training of like, there are no tablets. Like, okay, there was no Moses on high chiseling stone tablets. The Windhorse way is a living, breathing thing. It should never be tablets of stone. And that the three of us together are, I think, mature IPs, and we're in the work and all have big caseloads, and we have some take on what it is to be an intensive psychotherapist, that we're trying to create conditions where our trainee group can also, it's up to them, they may or may not get it, and it kind of brings up the question of like, who's to say who gets it and who doesn't? I guess we are. That brings up a lot of questions about that. So anyway, how's that?
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Yeah, I want to fill this out just a little bit, because there's a point to make about, in terms of Ed's quote, along the lines of what you're saying, Jack, is that the teachers are teaching the practices. So was it a long time ago, Friday morning, we had this presentation of mindfulness awareness, Tonglen and Maitri space awareness practice, then layered on council practice. There are other practices. Those are the core practices. And that each center really has to take responsibility for being able and capable of teaching those practices to the people in that center. That has to be strong and localized, because I think that's really true. is that if the Windhorse practitioners are practitioners and they're doing those practices are self-revelatory and self-instructive. A good practice teaches you in the doing. And so those practices are key. If we lose those practices, we're going to lose our way. Now that may not, I don't know whether that sound, is going to make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, Jack. I don't know. Actually, I don't really care.
Good. I'm glad.
I really don't care. I just think that is so important. So in that sense, you're teaching people. I mean, we all know this. Teaching people how to fish.
Yeah.
You just listen. You're going to have to do this. You want to be a student? Here, practice.
Right. I have no problem with that. And I think I was thinking about that early on during the practice section, and in our IP panel, was really thinking about there are these teams we engage in, and we get sick with them, and the practices teach us how to process it, and that they're so essential, and I think it's very important that we have shared practices. But I think of those as something, they aren't the thou shalts that I think of, the tablets on high. They aren't that at all. They're like in my life, I've studied Tai Chi quite a bit, and the reference points in Tai Chi are called principles, and that you embody principles, but they're very open-ended reference points. They're not chiseled in any stone either. So.
Can I just say that Rachel raised her hand? Could we get the mic to her?
It strikes me that an important voice to go along with the development of Windhorse teachers is access to those teachers and teachings, especially for newer clinicians. So as a BA, and having been at Windhorse for 2 years, I am hungry for more. And it's very challenging that the only way that I seem to get access to more teachings is if I'm able to bill clients, which I don't always feel good about because it's not always about a specific client. And I do a lot of self-study, and that's important, but getting supervision and having more access to the wisdom of senior clinicians, like, how do I get that? Because I want it, and I've been pursuing it. I have talked to several people about how do I get more. I've had a few one-on-one supervision sessions that I've requested and finagled ways to have them. And here I am. I want this. I want this knowledge. I want to embody it. This is my path. And I'm having a hard time getting it. So, I want to be in the IP training, but I am not even an assistant team leader yet. So I don't get access to that. And I understand the progression, but where is the place for me?
Oh.
So are you work in Windhorse Community Services?
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you ask the director?
Oh, I knew that.
Can I step in first? And
Yeah.
Jeff just moved to the back row.
Exactly. Rachel, I would say that you are on teams, many of them, and I think your access point is there. Because on every team, you're going to have folks who could answer the questions or give the teachings or the trainings or the specific kind of knowledge that you're asking for. Now, of course, you could go outside of that too, but what I mean is that you actually are in the realm of folks who have knowledge to share. It would be in the context of a team meeting being able to say, so what are you talking about there? Or how can I work with this from this particular perspective, et cetera. So that's just what comes to mind immediately. You do have access, maybe not in that larger study form and group, but you sure as heck, and I think you do, actually, ask and ask and ask and ask in that realm of being part of the team.
Yes, and often team meetings, many other things need to happen. And so I guess I want supervision. I really want part of what BAs get is one-on-one supervision, because I do get wisdom from team leaders and supervisors and IPs in team meetings. And then there are those who I'm like, oh, your mind works like mine. I would like to ask you some more personal questions, some more, specific things. So please give us one-on-one supervision.
So, Rachel, I love that you're so passionate. It's great. I think that I'm not responding to you as a director. I'm responding to you as a fellow person who feels passionate about this. And I think that in a way, we have to just join the dilemma of that. What does that look like? And we have to partner in looking at that. And first, you voice it. It's great that you're saying something. And then we join other people who feel a similar way. So I think there's a path, and I'm really glad you said something.
I have to say one more thing. So I just asked the question, why am I the only Track 1 BA person here? If we want to pass on the knowledge, did we support BAs to come here? I'm lucky that it's my day off. And how do we support BAs to engage? They're all working today. I heard many people say, I want to come, but I have shifts. I can't skip my shifts. So just adding that part, how do we support the engagement as well?
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
I'm so glad you said this. This is a great topic. It may not be very satisfying what I say, but your passion in I think all traditions. I was about to say in a Buddhist tradition, but it's not limited to Buddhism. In music, in dance, in any art form, in any medium, that longing is the most important. And my experience, when I have that kind of longing, it's a very precious situation. It can be painful. It can be very painful. But without that, I don't think you're open to learn at all. And when I was a BA, things were really different. They weren't organized in the same way. There was a kind of a chaos. The way that I learned so many things was from mentorship, being on teams with people. They just kind of showed up, and we naturally started to talk to each other, and there was a practicality of that teaching. And the way that it comes down is not, it's going to change, things change. But without that longing, I think then it feels like it's being shoved down your throat. So I just want to emphasize the preciousness of that longing without trying to figure it out too quickly. And I'm not dismissing this dilemma of, the teams don't stop just because we have a frickin' conference. Someone's crisis doesn't stop. We have people being paged, we have people falling down, we have, that's just what I know about, So, that's the practicality, but without that longing that you're talking about, Windhorse will die. So thank you for that. That's the flame. That's the heat in the flame.
You see what I'm talking about with the BA supervision group?
I want to say that I've been wondering about putting more energy into the teacher development, more focused energy. The Legacy Project is in the process of creating a very deep online resource center of materials for study and also for teachers. And so we're working on that. We're in the process of that. So that should happen this year. So we're trying to, in our own way, create the resources for teachers and the resources for igniting a further passion about learning altogether through all the centers as best we can, because the Legacy Project essentially is serving the international community. That's what we do. That's what we want to do, aspire to do. So, I mean, maybe we should even be doing something more formal than we're already doing. I mean, teachers emerge. There's some people that have a predilection for teaching. They learned how to be teachers somewhere. But maybe we should just create a Windhorse Teachers Academy and formally just get into it and start doing our best to train each other to be teachers of Windhorse. I don't mean teachers of anything. I mean teachers of Windhorse. And so at the risk of creating more work for, well, myself or other people, still, maybe we should be more direct and bold about this. I wonder, maybe everybody's fine with just the way it is. I'm not sure. Actually, that's a question. Which way?
I got the hot mic.
Oh, he's got it. Sorry.
Where are we?
Oh,
Oh,
He's in
sorry.
the middle.
So on Thursday night, I heard 4 themes come out of the session on Thursday night. One of them was affordability of the Windhorse model on both sides of the house. The second one was the dark side and how that manifests itself within individuals, within teams, and within clients, and how that gets managed. The third thing I heard was how do we get the knowledge that from experienced practitioners, people that have been around, and get that out, which is what we're touching on today. And the fourth one was what's next for Windhorse? Where's the evolution?
Yeah.
And I've been, I studied at the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland for a number of years, and part of my experience there was not only classes and mentorship, but the people that really practiced that, the first, second, and third generation of Gestaltists, they all took time to write down what they, how they applied the concept theory and methodology. And so when you don't have direct access to a mentor or someone who's very practiced, you can go back to any one of those books and you can just open up any page and you can find something that applies to what you're doing. And I would strongly encourage the teachers in Windhorse to start putting down their knowledge in whatever way what seems appropriate for you. I can't remember your name. Eugenie. She, on Thursday night, she said, well, maybe we should just people should start to write their stories about being a Windhorse practitioner. And I would just really encourage people to start doing that as another way of building on that knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you.
This could be quick. That's part of the vision of the Windhorse Journal, in all together in terms of our blog, podcast every other week. We're trying to create a place where people can go in and learn from all of us expressing one thing or another that is both inside and outside of Windhorse. And knowing that if we don't find our voices properly, it's going to be hard to transition this to the next generation. So it's an interesting publishing form of people that don't have to quite polish it up to regular written publication standards. But encourage all of you to tune into that. There's a lot of really cool stuff on there from Windhorse people, from outside, and we have years of plans that hopefully we can continue to work on.
Was it Sky? Is that right?
Just want to say a word to come back to what Jeff said about the core practices.
Oh yeah.
They're like fundamental. They're basic. This is what Windhorse grew out of. So I just am aware that in 2 of the centers they pay their staff to meditate together. It's part of their job, and they get paid to meditate in 2 of the centers. In 3, yours as well. Oh boy, Boulder, come on, Holly. You know what happened here? We have meditation every day, half an hour. There are several of us that are on this contemplative committee. Michael and Matt and Daniel was, and who's the other person? Jeremy. We hold that time. We used to get paid. We don't even get paid to hold the time, but it's important to us. So we're showing up and we're holding that space for whoever can show up during that half hour a day. So there you go. I just want to put that plug.
I think it
One
goes
more.
to
One more
Sky.
question.
Yeah. I think
One more
Sky's had her
question.
hand up quite
Yeah,
a bit.
good, good. 6 o'clock.
I love how you all snuck your way into like a really potent discussion. Feels like really rich food, actually. When you first were talking, I was thinking a lot about the concept of psychotherapy being an oral tradition. And it seems like from the periphery where I am, that Windhorse is also an oral tradition. So I was just playing with like, well, what makes up an oral tradition and its relationship? It's two people talking to each other in physical proximity. And there's really no automating that or making it more efficient. It takes as long as it takes. And I was thinking about how little kids do that thing where they say, "Mom, tell me that story about the time when you met Dad," or whatever. And that being a student of Windhorse sort of, it looks like it replicates that as well. Like, remind me again why I'm doing this. Remind me again why this matters or how this role works in a team. And then with Rachel's really great point, I then thought of sort of the shadow of the oral tradition, and which is there's sometimes not enough bodies to go around. Like, you need to hear something from your parent and they're not there to tell you, right? Or they don't have time to tell you the story you need to hear. And so then other narratives come in or get introduced to the system. So I just wanted to offer that sort of my own realization in this moment, like, this is an oral tradition, and these are the challenges that arise with that.
Thank you. Thanks, Guy. You know, it's 6 o'clock. Marta, right? I'm sorry? Please, please.
I guess I'll be that obnoxious, loud person in the back row, apparently. Because I've only been at Windhorse for 20 years, so what do I know? But being a co-teacher with Jack and Gretchen right now in the intensive psychotherapy seminar, what I've been sitting here thinking about this since you spoke. And for me, teaching that course, what I really feel is this connection with all of the people in that seminar. I care about them. I have worked with them for many years, and every one of them is unique. They all bring something different. They come from different backgrounds, and what I want to do is enrich our relationship and bring out the best in each one of them. And I feel like that's what we've been doing in this seminar so far. For how many months in are we? 7, 8, 9 months in. And it's an amazing experience. And you mentioned, you know, we're teachers and we're students. So I learn from every one of the people in that seminar, and it's just growing and getting richer. And I see every one of them developing and becoming more confident and able to connect and relax and work with their own minds and hearts with another person. And it's just a beautiful unfolding. And so that to me is such an important part of being a teacher in this tradition. It's a relationship tradition. So that, I think, is part of teaching.
Beautiful.
Oh,
I know we're just about done. I also wanted, in the context, as far as the teachers that have been teaching this area for so long, one who hasn't been acknowledged is Anne-Marie. And Anne-Marie has been involved as a teacher here in so many different ways, and has really brought the voice of an inclusive environment and just needing to expand here, the voice of women at Windhorse. And that's not against the men. There's been just, but there's the direction that as a community that we can and need to head in is a more inclusive environment. So with many different voices. So just to acknowledge that.
Oh. Jeff, anything to?
Yeah, I mean, I
with?
think we're there.
Just 6, yeah.
Yeah. It's 6, it's after 6.
Well, what I forgot to mention was that we also bow at the end of our meetings at Windhorse Boulder, and we'll do that today,
Blake?
both to acknowledge.
Blake, let's take just a moment before we bow, okay?
Righto. I'll just say both to acknowledge the end of what's happened and to mark the transition back into the speed of the world, and gratitude again for what's been shared.
Yeah, so let's just take another minute or two. We're going to just sit quietly. If you need the reference point of your breath, okay. And if you can just be pure presence, sheer presence.